Let's hit Mad Men, huh?
Yeah.
Bob, I feel like I can relate to this agency. Like they're going through a merger, a name change. They say they don't know our name because we don't know our name. I feel like, that's almost like us. We just changed our name. I can
That's
relate to the
right.
poor people. All right. So, lot in this episode. I mean, I feel like Mad Men can bear a very close reading. You could almost go line by line. We're not going to go quite that much, but I love it. So, Don is clearly on a downward trend. I mean, if we look at this whole season, and he's had previous low points too, I think. But I feel like it's starting to look like he might not pull out of this one.
Mm.
Um, but here's my question: why is Don's decline so unsympathetic? I mean, I gave my theory last week that Mad Men is at its best when it makes me feel like shit. And I can see what's happening to Don, but I don't feel it in the way I
Mm.
felt bad in the past for him or other characters. Why is that?
Maybe it's because it's been too long since the previous seasons where we've seen him kind of earn his status. Because right now, he is totally coasting in life, and you'd only be sympathetic if you had the context of what he had to get through to get to where he is, and
Yeah, I love that when
um,
he shows up for the partners meeting. And he's like, oh, there's a partners meeting? So he sits down and is like, so are we done here?
it's like the first thing he says, like, really? Wow. And
Sorry,
no,
keep going.
no, I was just gonna say I can't remember how long it has supposed to been, but normally, people who are older, like Bert, as portrayed in the show, they've put in 20 or 30 years, and then they're the quirky guy who have weird mannerisms that people kind of tiptoe around, but they deserve it because they built this on their back, and they came to the country with only dollars in their pocket, or whatever the immigrant story slash entrepreneur story is. It's hugely relevant because they put in 30 years to get to where they are. Whereas Don, it feels like he got fast tracked. For as much as he had to pay his own way in some ways, it felt like it was only a couple of years, and he's already like cashing in before he's really deserving it.
Well, but
That's
Don has been better at his job at his peak than anyone else in this whole show has been at their jobs at their peak, right?
right, but how long does that last? Like, if you are super good, even in the real world, if you're super good at your job for like a year, does that make it so that you can cash in for the next year, or what's the ratio? Like, I feel like Don, for being super good at what he was for a finite amount of time, it wasn't long enough to justify being sympathetic or allowing for his downfall and being like, it's okay because he did so many great things before. It feels like he was just getting started before he started his downfall.
So I feel like he hasn't paid his dues.
Yeah, and that's a weird thing for me to say because, like, do I really care if somebody pays their dues or not? No, but it does help play into the sympathy card for the character, right?
Shannon, what do you think about Don's decline? Are you like me, feeling it unsympathetic or not?
I don't know. It's interesting. It's as if he continually goes through these things that we would think would be cathartic for him, and yet he doesn't change. He remains the same, and I think that
Yeah.
that's more what it is for me. I do think it's interesting that Don is staying the same, and everything around him is changing so much, and
Mhm.
he is constant. I do think that's interesting, but it does make him less. I mean, you don't want to root for him to change when you kind of feel like he never will. So,
I think you're right. I like what you said. What does Don want anyway? Is it more money? Yeah. Creative freedom?
meh,
Not really.
not really
Uh,
anymore.
Love, intimacy, family, sex. I
I
mean,
mean, I
he
think
gets tired of all those things too.
yeah, he doesn't know. He doesn't know, and so that makes it hard for him to recognize when he has it good. I mean, I really think that. I mean, this season especially is really nailing home, like really hitting home what I've kind of been sensing from the beginning is that he's like really deeply troubled. Like he has a lot of mental health issues, and he's not gonna. We're not exactly in a cozy time for that in this time period. Like in this episode, Ginsburg is obviously having a mental breakdown, and people just
Roger
pat
has
him
a
on the.
therapist.
Roger has a therapist, that's true, but Betty had a therapist too, and that did her a whole fuck of a lot of good. You know, like he was calling her husband. You know,
Right.
but like Ginsburg is having like a real mental
Yeah.
breakdown, and people just pat him on the back and tell him like, "It's fine, go get him, slugger." Like I don't. This is not really a time in history when mental health is considered like it's considered a weakness. You know, so I don't think that he would ever recognize that he has all these like deep-rooted psychological problems that are really detrimental to his life.
And he's been so good at creating this persona.
That's fine. Like he thinks that he's fine, but he's obviously not fine.
Yeah. You know, I thought I loved one of Roger's lines that he says. What does he say? So my therapist says, the job of your life is to know yourself, and sooner or later, you'll learn to love yourself. And it seems like that's the opposite of what Don has done. He's been trying to erase himself or to not let anyone know him, and then as a result, he doesn't love himself.
I think he tries to control all the people around him to suit this like status quo that he's reached. Like he wants the relationships around him to stay the same because he doesn't understand how to change and move forward in a relationship. Like I think that he and Betty reached kind of, you know, Betty was changing and their relationship changed, so he ended it and tried to replace her with Megan. But now Megan is changing in a way that he is not prepared to deal with. Like he doesn't know how to deal with having a successful wife, you know, who has a mind of her own. He can't handle that. He can't handle Peggy not being his protege. He has to like make this merger happen so that she's subordinate to him again.
Yeah.
Like he just controls all the people around him to be able to stay exactly how he is because it's the only way he knows how to be.
And it was easier to put up with when he was great at what he does, but now he's not able to rely on that so much.
No.
Right.
He's not trying.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to move on to the next topic, unless you have more you want to say.
I was just going to say, I think that this episode he goes to California again, and that's in the past been kind of a transformative place for him to be. But then he almost drowns. So I think is like that's also indicative of him, of his decline.
He's his persona is dying, and he almost literally died.
He almost literally died. Yeah.
So, Joan and Peggy, some serious frenemy action going on here. Are they friends, enemies, little of both? So, hey, I'll start on this one. So, if you want to know
I'm talking a lot, so go ahead.
If you want to know who won the award for making me feel like shit this week, it was Joan. She wanted so much to make herself useful, and I would so love for her to be able to show some of her trademark competence, but she bombed at the client meeting. When Peggy was getting in her, you know, the Dawn school of pitching a client that Peggy's good at, Joan's just like, oh, we all get excited, but shut up, Peggy.
She didn't know what she was doing. She's never been in a meeting like that before, so she didn't recognize that that Peggy was working that guy.
Right.
She thought that she was being frivolous. But it's just that Joan's never been in this department before, so she doesn't know what she's doing.
And for once, she actually deserved being yelled at. She deserved people being upset with her because she was really messing it up.
She took initiative in a way that maybe she wasn't ready for. And I think that's what's the saddest thing about it. I think you're right, is that we know that Joan is competent, and that if she had maybe prepared a little bit better, if other people had supported her, she probably could have made that a success. But she took it into her own hands, tried it, and maybe failed. We don't know. Maybe they'll call, but I kind of don't think they will.
But Pete was right. Pete knows how to do it, and he said, no, you make the call, you tell them how great we are, then we tell them how great you are. It's how it's done, and you don't want Pete to be right, but this is what Pete's good at, actually, and it probably would have been better.
Another thing, though, is that, I mean, this is not the first time that somebody has done this. Lane did the same thing with Jaguar, and they all coached him. Like, when he had the lead, because he knew the guy, everybody was like, okay, this is what you need to do, and they set it up for him, and they let him go. But when Joan had a lead, they didn't let her go.
That's right.
And that's why I'm more sympathetic to this situation than maybe both of you are, because I'm processing this in real time. But throughout the episode, I actually sided with Joan in the sense that I wanted to see her try and fail more than I wanted to see the success of the company through Pete in his smarmy, typical way of doing his stuff. So if the goal is to win and to expand the client base, then yeah, it wasn't handled the right way, and Pete should have been involved, and Joan should have been backburnered, and she probably wasn't going to get any credit, and she was going to be totally pushed out of the whole way things get done, because unlike the previous character you mentioned, Shannon, that was coached through the whole coached through the whole thing, is very clear that there's nobody who's going to do Joan any favors in that way. And so
Well, I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, Pete said he would give her credit. I don't know why we thought he would lie about that.
because Pete's Pete, I don't know. He's going to share something for once.
Well, that's the job, isn't it? I don't know. I wasn't worried about that. I was worried that Ted disappointed Peggy again because they're like, hey, let's go to Ted. He'll do the right thing, and then he doesn't.
So
There's a lot of misreading going on in the whole episode. Like Joan misread the date, or it was the business meeting as a date. Peggy misread how her influence on Ted, what that would be. There was just a lot of misreading going on. And we don't know how Pete would have reacted, handled the whole thing. We'll never know now.
But I think that so Logan, just to double click on that, why was going to Pete not a bad thing, and it was going to work out for Joan in the end, if there was this whole sub thread of Peggy misreading Ted and Ted didn't do the right thing? So what wasn't the right thing by Ted handing it over to Pete? What was Peggy expecting, and what would have been better?
Well, I'm not saying it was going to work out in the end. You said that you thought Pete would do something different than what he said, and I thought there's no reason to think that. He still could have given her credit like he said he would.
Okay, I guess maybe I was carrying the way the story evolved to the next level, because I assumed that the way they made it seem like what Ted did was not what Peggy was wanting, therefore wasn't going to be good for Joan, implied that Pete was going to sort of take credit and leave her out of it or something. That's kind of how I read it, but anyway.
Yeah, as Shannon says, I guess we may never know now.
But I was rooting for Joan. I wanted to see her, even if this doesn't work out, I want to see her take some more risks. I mean, she's secure in her financial well-being and that sort of thing. So I want to see her try a little bit more, get more involved.
Is she? I mean, she could potentially get fired for this or be bought out or something.
I thought we saw in a previous episode that the partners were saying... We've seen before how Joan was going to be paid handsomely for this, though. I thought, like, even if she's fired, she's going to be set for life or something by her standards.
Yeah,
I mean, if she tries to live like Roger, then of course that's different.
I don't think that's what the goal is, though. She likes to work. She wants to work and be successful.
Yeah, there's some jealousy, resentment of Peggy for being valued for the big boy, the male work that she does, and then Joan, Joan wants a little bit of that.
She does. And I think that they've always had kind of an uneasy relationship because of that, because they're both women who are trying to succeed in the same workplace, but they've taken completely different tracks. And from the beginning, Joan's advice to Peggy was, Peggy never really took it. Joan was like, you can't be a man. Don't act like a man. Stop dressing like a man. You're a woman. And and Joan really embraces that, her feminine power. But Peggy does. I mean, she wears these masculine suits. She does a man's job. She tries to be one of them, and that has led to her success. And Joan feels like, it's her time to have success as well. So I like that she took the initiative. So we'll see where it goes.
And it's gonna kill me. Usually there's approximately a month between episodes. But I want to see the details of how we get from this month to the next month, because it seems like such an interesting time, especially for Joan. What's going to happen?
Yeah.
I know. I hope he calls. I mean, if there was ever a company that was, tailor-made for Joan to be able to be on the account, it's Avon. It's perfect.
Yeah.
So I hope that they didn't screw that up, because...
Right. But I don't know. As, my working theory that Mad Men's at its best when it makes you feel like shit. Maybe just gonna end up really bad for Joan.
I don't know. There's been a lot of really ominous, lurky violence percolating in the background for this whole season. So it does feel like it's pointing to something really bad that's going to happen, but I don't know what it is.
It's interesting, those protests of the Democratic National Convention, and where I saw that reflected was in the inter-office politics. What exactly is Jim Cutler up to? Does he want the office to crash and burn? Does he have an escape hatch of his own? It's hard to tell. Yeah, I don't know. They went with that olive branch of, let's just call it Sterling Cooper and Partners. What is this cat up to?
I thought that was sort of like they're okay to not be in the name because they don't want to be there anymore. They're gonna, try to bail out somehow and take the people that they want. I don't know. I was confused about putting Bob Benson on Chevy. Like, was that a sabotage thing, or was that having one of their own guys on Chevy so that they could take Chevy when they go? I couldn't tell.
Oh, yeah. So Bob Benson, he's a real mystery of this season.
What's up with Bob Benson? I'm so confused.
The one thing about it, though, is we actually saw Bob Benson doing his actual job a little bit. I guess he does two things most of the time. He's either hanging out in the creative lounge or he's listening to motivational records in his office, just waiting for the time when he's needed.
That's not what you do at work? That's kind of my job. No.
I thought that was funny. It's like, who is Bob Benson? Bob Benson is whoever you need him to be. And when he's alone in a room, he's no one.
Right.
He just sits there.
And in a way, that's sort of like Don. He's whoever you need him to be. I mean, that's, very much like Don. And did Bob Benson do a good job at his job this week, or was he not 100% successful? It's hard to tell. I mean, it wasn't his fault, probably, that Manischewitz didn't go well. And it seemed like he handled it well by coming to Jim Cutler and to Ted. And then he tries to cover for Jim. Like, I talked him out of going. It wasn't his fault.
He's always doing that. He's good at that.
And then Jim Cutler, some spark, some light bulb, bing, goes on top of his head, and he's like, yeah, you're just the man I need. You're going to be our Chevy guy. But that's sneaky Jim Cutler. I just don't quite see what his end game is.
And sneaky Bob Benson, too, because, I mean, what is that? He lies all the time. Like, it seems to come easy to him. You know? Like, he lied in the emergency room to the nurse.
Yeah.
He told that Joan drinks shoe polish. He told, at the funeral after he sent the food, he covered for himself, possibly overstepping by saying, like, well, my father just died, and I know I appreciated all the support I got then. But then he told Pete that the nurse is available because the nurse nursed his father back to health.
Right.
And now he just lied about, talking Cutler out of going to the Manischewitz meeting. So he lies constantly. Like, so I don't understand. I don't know. He's really a confusing character for me.
And do we have word on whether he and Joan are boning? I can't quite figure it out. Were they just friends going to the beach together, or are they an item?
It was very vague. I think it was on purpose that it was vague. I mean,
because they didn't share any scenes this episode again.
So it doesn't seem like they're dating.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe he's gay.
Maybe.
I've read that theory.
That's what Ginsburg said.
Gay. Yeah,
Are you a homo?
said.
Ginsburg asked. And he just avoids the question.
He just avoids the question. And he's going to the beach with Joan, but he's not dating Joan. I mean, maybe it's her, her pal, her gay pal.
Yeah, and the shorts he was wearing, too. No, that's probably more just a function of the time, but
those are times. Yeah, those are apropos.
All right. Anything else we want to hit on this episode of Mad Men?
Well, another weird theory that I've read. Have you guys read this Megan Draper Sharon Tate theory?
Tell me more.
Well, the internet thinks that there's all this ominous foreshadowing this whole season about like death and murder and riots and stuff. Is that Megan's going to get murdered because she's wearing this T-shirt in one scene that Sharon Tate made famous.
That's right.
And Sharon Tate's this actress that was murdered when she was pregnant. So we think that, the internet seems to think that maybe this is all pointing to Megan being murdered at some point. And also that in this episode, Don hallucinated that private that he'd met in Hawaii as dead, and then he hallucinated Megan. And then he almost died.
Dun,
so,
dun,
dun, dun, dun. And then this old lady breaks into their apartment with ease. So, there's this breaking and entering, this undercurrent of death. I don't know.
My mind is being blown in real time.
Oh,
whoa. That, wow. Because, Mad Men for me lately has been good, not great. Like, even better than good, but still not quite great. Like, I'm sort of coasting on my previous love affair with it. Sort of like, Don's relationship with Megan. But
so
right
sad.
now, yeah, it just feels like it's kind of in a lull a little bit. So if, there's, a murder thing happening or it's all for some grand reveal, which Mad Men sometimes does, then that would be really interesting, because I'm feeling like Mad Men, I'm ready for it to sort of wrap up, because I don't know where they can go other than introducing these quirky characters that you don't get enough backstory on, and then, I don't know. It's still a good show, though. Don't mean to end on a downer there, Logan. I like Mad Men.
All right.
I don't know how it's going to end. I always thought it would end with Don either dead or living in California. Like, or both. I don't know.
But Don has a really hard time changing anything about him.
Yeah. So maybe it'll just end. I'm not changing? I don't know.
And it seems like he's getting closer to Roger, just drinking, not really justifying his high pay level. He's getting closer to that every day.
Speaking of which, how rich do you feel like these guys are? Who, if you were to rank them, and could they just all stop coming to work and they'd be fine? They could early retire, and they're just doing this out of a sense of duty, or because nowadays people don't have the same sense of like, I've got to put on my suit and carry my briefcase into an office, and it feels like back then, even if you had a lot of money, you still needed to like space out in an office, not at home or something.
I think they have a lot. If they wanted to retire these partners, I think they could.
But they're the type of guys that wouldn't do that. I mean, their whole identity, I feel like, is connected to their work and what they do. Like, who's Don if he's not an admin? He's Dick Whitman. So,
Heaven forbid.
Heaven forbid.
All right. Okay, so that do us on Mad Men? Anything more anyone's dying to say?
No, I think that's it.
Okay, well, Shannon, thanks for being with us. Always fantastic to talk TV with you. Thanks, especially for your Game of Thrones help. Always, always nice. All right. Well, we're going to say goodbye to Shannon here. You're welcome to hang out with us on the Hangout if you want, or go about your morning. Catch on the flip side. Oh, yeah?
Bye.
Bye.
Have a good one, you guys. Thanks.